Good afternoon, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg. I'm still aching a little bit from our first scouting trip of the year, fall scouting trip. We were up there last spring, but this is the first of the scouting trips in preparation for hunting older bucks. And that's what we do. You know, one of the things that makes it a little easier for John and I and my son Ken and my son Dave to find what we're looking for is, after all these years, 30 years of hunting in this area, we know where doe home ranges are and where buck home ranges are. Usually the doe ranges, there's 4 or 5 of them within a buck home range, and it's roughly about a square mile in size, you know, for one buck, one dominant breeding buck. There's other bucks within the range, lesser ones that were a little lower in the local pecking order of bucks. So that makes it easy for us. I mean, if we want to know if there's, like for example, last year I ended the season not taking the buck I really wanted to hunt last year. And the first thing I wanted to do when we went up there is make sure he's made it through the winter, find his tracks. We found tracks of that buck in May, last May, but I wanted to make sure he was still alive and make sure he was still using trails he used last year and the bedding area he used last year. And if he was, then my odds of being able to find new stand sites this year, new stand sites for taking that buck would be much easier, be able to do this more quickly. And so that happens. My 3 sons and I scout about 6 square miles, sometimes a little more than that. I haven't found out if Dave is going to be going beyond that 6 square miles like he sometimes does. But that's a big area, you know. A square mile is a big area. And so during our first scouting this year, John and I worked on what we would call the northern half of where he and I normally hunt. And my sons usually hunt north and west of that. And so we were covering just half of what we normally hunt. And there's 2 square miles involved here. And this square mile here, this purple line represents the outer part of a buck home range. And in this case, in this area, there's 4 doe ranges. They're outlined in orange, and purple is the big buck. And I know it's a scrambled mess there, it looks like, but that's pretty typical of our maps that we make every year of the area where we hunt. But basically, there's a beaver pond down here, and there's a stream up there. And these home ranges, these are doe home ranges in the next buck home range. This is one buck, one dominant breeding buck's home range, and the other one goes this way. And there's another one beyond that, over on that side. But one of the things about this particular home range, buck home range, the doe ranges are all circle these clear cuts. There's a clear cut here. It's in a low area. There's water in there. There's puddles of water in there. Terrible place to walk through. I hate that clear cut. Here's another one over here. Same story. But that's higher. It isn't as wet as this low one over here. This is a muddy mess in there usually. And then down here is an old one. It's getting grown. It's getting to be quite large. The trees in there are getting to be quite large. And you can't see near as far in any direction in that clear cut as you can in these here. This is a really old one. But there's things about it there. Like, for example, last year when we went up there, first thing I wanted to do was find out if that big buck was okay. And I wanted to scout this area here. This area. And so, you know, you guys that have never scouted before, it might take you 2-3 years, if you're diligent about it, to create maps like this with important information on it to be able to know where a doe range is and where a buck range is. But you know, unless there's a big fire here or they log a big section of it, it's the same year after year. All these ranges tend to be traditional in location. And the doe ranges are divided by some natural things like maybe a stream or a swampy area, low areas between them, or a high ridge or a road sometimes. But they're separate. They don't overlap one another like buck home ranges. There can be 5 bucks living in that range, antler bucks, not counting yearling bucks, 5 of them in this area, and their ranges overlap quite a bit. You know, so in one area here you might have 2 bucks that are 2.5 to say 3.5 or 4.5 years of age living in one area, and they're sharing that range. But the doe ranges are always close. But when you got a clear cut in the middle of a bunch of, or 2 there, in a bunch of doe ranges around it, that usually means if you were out there, say opening morning, and here come, it's starting to get light now, and the deer have started feeding before, and you're looking out there. First, you might see a doe and fawn, and maybe a yearling buck over there. They're feeding together, and you look further down the clear cut way over here, and there's another doe and fawn way down there. And you look back the other way and say, oh, there's one right over here. And maybe it's been bedding right in front of where you're sitting at that particular moment. But we like these big old clear cuts out in the woods, this deep wilderness area, by the way, because there's usually 2 or more does and their young, yearlings and fawns, feeding together there, early in the morning and then late in the afternoon. And what that means, the odds that one of them, including the yearling does, are going to be in heat. And it improves your chances of taking a big buck because there's more than one doe out there that likely will be in heat at any one time during that first 2-week period, starting in early November and going toward little past the middle of November. And so we like those big ones. You know, little clear cut or little feeding areas might only have one doe, and that doe is only going to be in estrus or in heat for 24 to 26 hours. But when you might miss that altogether because you hunted over here instead, where so you might miss that one for the entire first 2-week breeding period of the rut. But if you're hunting a larger one, you might, like say in this one here, there could be 5 or 6 does that are going to be in heat during that 2 to 4 weeks. And so your chances of seeing one that's in estrus and being trailed by the big dominant breeding buck during that period are much improved in those kind of places. So that's the point. Now that buck that I hunted last year, he liked to bed right here. That purple dot you see there, that's a little knob out in the woods, kind of a rocky outcropping with a bunch of trees on, some big pines on it, and a lot of brush, real heavy cover there, where my wife and I photographed some little cubs many years ago, and the mother got kind of upset by that and chased us out of there. And it's been known forever since that time as Forebear Hill. Well, last year that buck was bedded there, or that was his bedding area, and it appears it's his bedding area again this year. And there's a trail that we use that goes right around in front of it. That buck has learned to watch for us hunters, or others in the group, like my son Ken and Ryan, and Ken's wife Sue walked by that several times last year. Well, I won't go. I told you all about why that didn't work, but this year I decided I'm going to try again, because he's still alive, and I can't wait to see that buck again. He looked really great last year, 400 yards away. But so this year I decided I'm going to hunt at sites where that buck doesn't have a chance to know I'm there the first time he comes through this area. You know, like right here, you'll see that in some of our video footage from our last scouting trip, what this is all about. But the point is, I didn't want to leave any trail scent in an area where he's likely to come across it before he walks into sight of me sitting at 2 new stand sites. No trail scent to warn him. And I'm going to go to those through really heavy cover to get to these stand sites. They're ground level, you know, using natural cover. And we embellished some of these a little bit with evergreen boughs, but a lot of them, they started out as just a pile of rotten trees or broken trees in one spot. We kind of rearrange them and then put a brush and a few evergreen boughs in there to create a solid screen that would give me cover so I could raise my rifle without that rifle being seen, without that motion being seen, that kind of thing. But anyway, that site is right there. And over on the other side of the pond, which ends like here, is another area that whitetails come down to drink water morning and evening. And I've seen deer come down to the water several times, so I thought, well, gee, if the wind's right, I might see a buck come to water on the opposite side there. We haven't scouted that. That's my son David's kind of his area, and his son's area, where they like to hunt down there. So, but if one comes to water there, my chance of seeing a different buck there are very good. And, well, anyway, I'll be watching them. Here's a spot where they like to come down the water. It comes right down to the water right there. And I come in from way over this way, so there's no likely possibility that that buck is going to realize he's in the area when he comes down to water there. And so I'm going to be sitting there. And there's another trail that comes in from one side here, from over this way, right down to where I'm sitting. A well-used deer trail, by the way. It looked pretty exciting there. And we found the big droppings made by the buck, typical of him and his tracks. Now this year, leaves were falling. It was gorgeous up there last weekend. All the colors, the red maples and sumacs and a lot of other yellow birches, gorgeous. Well, it was beautiful. And anyway, because the leaves are falling, and it's been kind of dry up there all summer. They just started getting rain. It rained every day. We were up there this year, 4 days. One morning it was nice, clear, sunny, beautiful day. And by noon it was starting to sprinkle rain again. And by the time we left there, it started getting serious again. But it rained hard up there. But anyway, that was one spot I set up for hunting this bit. Morning, guys. We're finally up in the woods scouting, getting ready for the hunting season. I built a new blind here, and this one, last year, this big buck I was after, he gave me a clinic on how to avoid stand hunters. And partly, I think, because it's bedded on a little knoll behind where I was sitting last year, where I planned to sit and watch him coming down the trail down there, which he often did after hunters went on past that and went out in that direction to hunt in tree stands or ground level. And so opening morning I went out there with them, and they went right on by, and I dropped off and went in there, and I had a good big tree down there and good cover. Nice place to sit. Well, about 9 o'clock I heard something walking behind me, a heavy cover, like the cover right behind, over this way. And later on I went over that way, started my way back to camp, and sure enough the buck had walked there, and when he did that, he was downwind of me. Then he crossed my trail again, heading up to the next place where I'm going to build a blind for him. But I thought this year I'm going to stay afar from that area, that trail that he likes to use, that we share, that big buck and us hunters. And one of the places he likes to go was in that timber across this little bay on this beaver pond. And there's a low spot over there where they like to drink water. And a lot of deer drink water there. It's good, well-used deer trail. And I was thinking, I had a blind over there, but where I was sitting, they'd be right back on top of me before I'd see them. And I thought about that this year. And this year I'm going to do things a little differently. This blind, made from natural materials, and we kind of embellished it with evergreen boughs, but with all these substantial logs holding it up. If it snows between now and the opener, this will stay put. It won't sink down like if it was all made from flimsy material like just evergreen boughs. But the evergreen boughs add good cover in the middle of all these logs, so I won't, my movements, any movements I make there won't be seen. And when I'm sitting on my stool here, only about this much of me above my hand here will be visible, and I'll be wearing my camel headnet and my camel blaze orange cap on top, and I don't move a lot. Well, anyway, this the reason I wanted this here is because when I'm coming in this way, I will put no fresh trail scent on any trails over on the side where the buck beds, and where it comes down to feed or comes down to drink water. Be nothing between here and where that buck often travels, and he's a big guy. So to tip off the buck that I'm here, I'm somewhere close by, and I'm certainly going to be a long ways away from that knoll over there where he likes to keep track of hunters going past on that trail to head out in that direction. So this is the first blind I'm building to hunt that same buck this year, and he's still alive. This, my dear hunting friends, are the droppings of a really big buck. Look at it, they're a little over an inch long. This is a buck that'll weigh over 300 pounds if I can get him. This is the buck I had, this was my first choice last year, and I put most of my time into hunting him, and he kept making a fool of me. Now I've got new plans for him this year, and I think maybe I've got a better chance of taking him finally. So hopefully, this might be his last year to live. I think he's probably 6.5 now, but he's a monster buck, really nice buck. So there's the proof that he exists, and this is not far from where I'm going to be hunting him.
That's a big 4-inch track.
Yeah, trophy class buck. That won't give that buck any idea that I'm here unless the wind is blowing wrong. Some winds would be wrong, like south wind would be terrible. I can't hunt here with a south wind, but anywhere from west to northeast, any wind in that direction will work really great right here. So it being it's well into November when our firearm hunting season begins, there's a good chance we'll have a west or north wind. Well, we often start with a south wind on the opener when they hunt earlier. So, well, anyway, I have one more blind on a similar kind of deal where won't give this buck living over in this area any idea I'm near because of my trail scent. You have to be thinking about trail scent all the time when you're hunting older bucks, and you don't want to be tipping them off where you are you think you're doing a good job, being scent-free as possible and maybe even using some kind of cover scent, but that doesn't work. Wherever you step, and not only whitetails will readily smell your tracks, but they can even gauge how long ago you've passed, and if it's really fresh, they're going to stay away from that. Maybe the rest of the hunting season. So this is the first blind that won't give that buck a chance to get that kind of information. So now we're on our way to another blind. If he gets by here, if he stays back in the timber, he likes to head up in another area up there. There's several does living in doe ranges up there that come together, and he goes up there, and so the next blind will catch him doing that. And again, it'll be in a place where he won't have any previous knowledge that I'm there when I sit there. So come opening morning, I'm going to have a hard time deciding whether I want to be here or up there. But I got two of them, so that'll give me a full day, maybe a day and a half of hunting in this area for that big buck. Okay, well, let's get busy, John. There's another spot here. This big orange spot here is a bedding area for does and their young. See, we went up there, there's beds all over in the grass there. And this buck, he loves to, when he comes down the water here or goes to the water, he uses a trail that heads right up there, and then he goes up here to check out the does in this area, feeding in those two places as well. So we set up another stand here. Most of it was natural cover. We added a few little things there to better hide my silhouette. The thing about ground level hunting I like, you can always find a spot with good background cover. My silhouette is never clearly skylighted. You're up in the tree, and even if you think you're well covered, you're in the morning against a bright sky and the sun's coming up. If you're up there, your dark silhouette becomes clearly visible, even though you might have some branches around you where you're sitting. On the ground, you can have solid cover, just be really hidden, well concealed from your chin down while you're sitting on the stool, anywhere you want. And background cover is just as important as the stuff in front of you. And so on the ground, we can find spots like that everywhere. And that's what we were looking for when we were scouting. We scouted all this area, and then we figured we traveled about 10 miles in doing it. But we looked at all this area very carefully and cleaned up trails to get rid. Some of these trails, like this one going all the way around here, is one of our cruise trails when we're searching midday for very fresh finds of a big buck. And parts of it, some parts of it we haven't used for a way. We bypassed it. We kind of extended it out to get to the entire original cruise trail cleaned up. When I say cleaned up, we just throw dead branches aside. Sometimes trees, if they aren't really big, we'll just drag them to the side and get them off the trail. And if there were some big ones there, rather than try to cut through the darn thing, we'll kind of detour around it. And we marked the trail again with fluorescent tacks, different kinds of tacks, but fluorescent tacks. So we can use this trail early morning or late evening, going back to camp in the evening or going out in the morning to get to stand site approach trails that branch off. We got trails or stand sites that branch off all over the place in this country. But what we're always looking for is new stand sites that we've never used before. Because stand sites that have never been used before are always our most prolific stand sites. Well, I've got two new ones now for this big buck that likes to bed here. I got one there and one up here. And that's one of the first places he goes to. He might be with that doe there, and so I can be sitting there in the morning, and when they're coming back from feeding out in this clear cut, for example, coming down here, I'll catch them coming back. And this buck here too, in the morning, he's probably long gone from that. And usually they bed really early. Drink water really early, and then go out to feed, and then drink water again in the evening. But it doesn't always work that way. He might be with this doe, or some doe up in one of these other areas, And now, today, she's no longer in heat. So he might come back this way and come back down here to drink water and then head back over to his bedding area midday and get really active again in the middle of the afternoon, sometimes middle of the day, but he'll be in this area until the evening feeding cycle. So one of the things we're always looking for is potential new stand sites. You know, we might get over in this area and walk over here, holy cow, here's a really nice spot, look at lots of deer sign here, tracks and droppings. Well, speaking of tracks, I started out to tell you, because the leaves are falling and it's been dry there, most of them, tracks were hard to find. My son Ken and his son Ryan were up there a week before we were, and they reported the same problem. Hard to see tracks dead, but we saw plenty of droppings. And you know, that we've taken many bucks, on no more sign than fresh droppings. And as I've been trying to teach you all along, all these 50-some YouTube seminars that I've given you here this year, dropping lengths can tell you what size of buck or deer made the droppings, you know, all the way from fawn to 2.5-year-old bucks, 3.5, or 3-year-old does or older. They don't change much after they're 3. Their tracks are 2.5 to 3. Their tracks are typically 3 inches long, sometimes 3 1/8. They might get fatter, you know, look bigger, but their tracks, their hoofs don't grow much after age 2.5. So, but bucks are different. They keep getting bigger and bigger as time goes on, and they'll finally hit a plateau where their tracks in this country are usually no longer than 4 inches, not counting the blue claw indentations you see in snow or soft soil. So 4-inch tracks, that's a big buck. So the bucks we hunt have tracks 3 5/8 inches all the way up to 4 inches. Those are all mature bucks. But most of the ones we want are close to 4 inches. We see 4-inch tracks, we get really excited. But this year so far, we up there for another 4 days to scout the last half of the area we normally hunt. And there's going to be a lot of country to cover there. But anyway, anytime we find droppings that are 3/4 to 1 inch long, sometimes a little longer, that's the bucks. That's one of the bucks we want to hunt. And every year we try to have, each of us tries to have 2 or more bucks to hunt. 3 is even better if we can, but we can't be really fussy this year because our deer numbers are still down to around 6 per square mile. You know, not counting the new little fawns that are out there. We've already seen a decrease in numbers of fawns. When we were there in May, we found lots of tracks made by twin fawns. You see doe tracks, for instance, and then little tracks of 2 different deer trailing. This year we didn't find tracks of twin fawns anywhere, you know, in October. So that means, as usual, our wolves have been taking a lot of fawns over the summer. We'll know more about our total fawn crop by the end of our hunting season in November. But deer numbers continue to be down and wolf numbers continue to be way out of sight because they've been protected in this area for 45 years now, which is really a cruel thing. What could be more cruel than allowing wolf numbers to get so high that they no longer have enough food in there? They've whittled the deer population down to 5 or 6 per square mile. It's getting hard for all those wolves to find adequate food, and we see lots of signs of problems because of that, including a lack of pups, and wolf pack sizes become smaller. In the last few years, our wolf pack has only numbered 4 to 6 wolves. Well, back to his. Anyway, you can see here why it would take us this long to cover our hunting area. But now, we found another big buck. Where was he here? Up here. here and here, with big buck droppings and tracks up in that area. Now, John has taken a buck that was very close to this spot right here several years ago, a really nice buck that's on the wall. And when we found tracks of a buck, a probable 4.5 to 6.5 year old dominant breeding buck in that area, and then again over here, that got to be pretty exciting. Now, okay, hey guys, some more very fresh droppings made by a really nice buck, probably one for the wall. I would guess this guy is maybe a 4.5 year old. Yeah, boy, you get this one, you'll probably rush him to a tax service. It's so nice to see one here. John shot one on the wall, not far from here, probably about 100 feet from here. And that was many years ago, so. But it's sure nice to see droppings like that out here. Yep. Oh, that's a nice buck. John is very good at ground level stand hunting. And this area is heavily wooded, lots of evergreens. It's easy. You can walk up anywhere and say, oh, look at these tracks here, and this buck has been using this trail. It wouldn't take more than about 30 seconds for John or I or my other sons to realize, oh, that is a good spot to sit there. Good cover at ground level. You can sit in there, and like the buck he got there last year, it was only about 20 feet away when he shot it. And it was with a doe, and they got that close before they even saw him. And sitting in one of these kind of places where it's well covered by evergreens. So, no problem here. We don't necessarily have to take time to put blinds up there. I needed the blind close to this water's edge. It wasn't good enough. I needed a new blind over here, same way. Nothing that was quite dense enough to hide me well, where I could be within sight of that bedding area. So we had to create a little better blind in that area, embellish it with evergreen boughs and such. So those two needed work, but they're brand new. And boy, a brand new stand site with the kind of knowledge about this big buck and the signs we were finding. Gee, we found his tracks right there on that trail when we were scouting, and boy, nice big 4-inch tracks in the mud, one muddy place there. That was exciting to see. So anyway, we covered it all. We could go out, every day, starting on day 3, we could walk on our cruise trail here. It's nicely clean now and marked. The average guy walking in the woods, you could cross that cruise trail 60 times and never realize it's a cruise trail. You wouldn't be very likely to spot those little fluorescent tacks during the daylight hours. They're hard to see during daylight. But at night, oh, they all lit up. But anyway, this whole area, we know we have 2 big dominant breeding bucks in the area, and we know, well, this one might not be, but he's a big one, but this guy certainly is. And he's close to it, certainly close to it. He's a really big buck. We've got at least that, and we found evidence of a 3.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old and a couple yearling bucks in the area as well, in our scouting in this area. Hey guys, look here, there's a fawn track. See, it's only about 2 inches long. That fawn will grow another 1/2 inch by November, and this is just beginning of October. But you find that means there's a mature doe here. And a little earlier we found a track that was getting close to 3 inches. And that's yearling doe, smaller. Mature doe will have a track 3 inches. Then you get down under that a little ways, and that's a yearling doe. And you get down to this side, that's a fawn. So we've already determined here that in this area is a mature doe with a yearling doe and a fawn. And we also found some tracks that indicate there's a big buck here too. This is the buck I'm planning to hunt this year again. He outfoxed me right from almost this spot once last year. I was quite a ways from him. And I couldn't believe it. I was a good 400 yards away, and he spotted me, and I was just sitting still. When I raised my rifle, he saw that motion, and he was staring at me when I put my scope on him. Well, I was thinking about maybe that's too far and there's too much stuff in the way. I shouldn't shoot. He made up my mind for me by turning and took 3 bounds over in this direction, and I couldn't see him anymore. But he's here. He made it through the winter. So I'm going to be these new stand sites. The first one you saw, that was for his watering spot. And the next one will be for his travels between this area where there are quite a few does surrounding an old clear cut. That's still a good place for both grasses and clover and stuff like that. And then browse after the first week in November. And so it's a big one, and it's been one of our best places to take bucks in the last several years. And we'll be adding another stand site or 2 to that area this year. We're planning for different wind directions. So anyway, that's a fawn track means a lot. And those deer, these 3 deer that we found in this area based on their track lengths, are the best buck lures in the woods. And we treat them well. We want them around when we're hunting big bucks, because that's the reason for that buck to be there. So, well, here's the track. It's 3 inches long. That's the mature doe that fawn was traveling behind. So we know she's here. One of the things we noticed when we're up there, bucks usually have clump droppings in fall, late fall, and November, all through the winter until spring. And we were finding droppings of bucks. They were a little older droppings, not a month old, but maybe a week old, that were dry on the outside, and but still well shaped. Those were probably made a week earlier, and then some that were just made that morning. The first morning we got out there, they were just made. And they were clumped, or at least beginning to be clumped. They weren't tight clumps like you see later on. But using those, we found measuring droppings out there in one area. And this was a small area, just maybe the size of this yard, an area about that size. We found 5/8 inch unclumped droppings. It was weighed a week or more earlier, made by a 2.5-year-old buck. They were 5/8 inches long. That's typical of a 2.5-year-old buck. And then we found a 1/2 inch clump dropping. Now, doe droppings are usually 1/2 inch for we hunt, but when they're clumped, that's a buck dropping. And what that means is that with that size 1/2 inch clump droppings are made by yearling bucks. We found evidence of a yearling buck in that area, and they were kind of fresh. And then we found some unclumped droppings, 7/8 of an inch in length in that one area. And those droppings were made, absolutely made by a buck 4.5 to 6.5 years of age, a trophy class buck. And it might be this buck that made those. And then we found some more 5/8 inch clump droppings made by a 2.5-year-old buck. So we knew there was at least one 2.5-year-old in that area, and in a tough year, if it's getting toward the end of the season and we only have 3 bucks so far that we like to, all of a sudden some of those 2.5-year-old becomes worth taking. So we get our limit of, well, of 4, our self-imposed limit of 4 for the game. And that gives us all enough venison for the year, venison, sausage. Then we found some 3/4 inch clump droppings in that area. Playing around here, that early frost we had up here, they've had it a number of times, so he's been pawing here. Probably putting scalp musk on that little tree there. So this is a big buck, yeah, great big one, yeah. You'll see him in our garage when I come home from deer hunting, yeah. Morning guys, out scouting again. There's some interesting deer sign here. See this? Droppings down here, they're clumped. And those individual droppings are 5/8 inch. No, well, let's see. 3/4. Yeah, this buck I'd say was a 3.5-year-old, judging by the lengths of his droppings. And right next to it here, we've had frost up here, a number of days last week, and like I figured that would get him started making antler rubs, and he's been pawing out spots next to this little tree here, likely rubbing scalp musk on that little spruce tree there. But early signs, usually they don't start this till the middle of this month, but with the cold weather we've had up here, it gets them going. So that's kind of an interesting sign. I would wager you'll see pictures of this taken in November while we're dragging it back to camp. There's a big clear cut right over here, and that's where they'll be, a doe feeding out there. We found evidence of a doe with a yearling doe and a fawn living in this area, out in that area there. So this guy will be, a good chance he'll be with that doe one day, and which will improve the chances of taking them. But nice to see some early ground scrapes. Haven't seen any rubs yet, but normally wouldn't expect it this early. So, nice sign. Now that was a little bigger buck, and that was probably a 3.5-year-old. So there we had at least 3 bucks. A yearling, a 2.5-year-old, and 3.5-year-old, and then that one with the 7/8 droppings, a really big buck, probably a dominant breeding buck in that one area. In this area, right in here. Exciting area to be on opening morning. I'm hoping I want a northwest or north wind that morning. That's what I'm hoping for. If it's like that, that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to be next to that pond opening morning. But one spot we were looking at, getting close to this clear cut right here. And we wanted to go around it, we wanted to get to a spot up in this area, getting close to this one here. And it was, this clear cut, this part wasn't all filled in like in other areas, where it'd be kind of open. And we didn't want to go across this area, although there was a really good spot for a stand side a little ways up here. So we decided when we stopped right here, and there was a steep little bank going up to the top where this clear cut was started right here. It's kind of a high area. We decided this would be a good stop short sight. And we marked it with 3 tacks, and this is a stop short sight. Don't you dare go up along this edge until you've spent enough time here. Wait till first light and make sure there's no deer walking around right in front of you here, because you probably will be spotted. Hey guys, we're creating a new trail following deer trails to get quite a ways from here. Long trail ahead of us, but we're going around an old clear cut here. And down below here is all kinds of browse that deer feed there. About 300 yards that way is where I saw that big buck the last year that I was hunting in this area. But to go from this point to a good, really great stand site down closer to the edge here in the morning, in the dark. To just go right through from here would be a mistake because you'd be so visible right here in the middle. And yet that's such a good spot. So places like this, we have them all over this country. Not all over, but several different areas of the country. We make this a stop short site. Stop here and in the dark, wait till it gets light, listen and watch and you start to see if you can see any deer moving around out there through these bigger trees here. There, down this way, see any motions at all before you move forward. Because if there's deer there and you just go through here in the dark, you're gonna frighten them away. They're gonna see you for sure. There isn't good stand site approach cover all the way to that spot. So we call these stop short sites, and I usually mark them with 3 tacks. That tells you this is a place to stop short and wait till it gets a little bit light before you move on. After you've made sure that there's no deer in the immediate area. This would be a place too where you wouldn't use a flashlight beyond this point. All good heavy cover behind us to get here. You could use it keeping it pointed at the ground all the way. But when you get to this spot, from there on, no flashlight. You know, we're really sensitive about having good approach trail cover. Either a ridge between us and where we expect to see the deer, and this was one of those places. There was a ridge here, and the deer would be out in this area, and it's kind of open over in here. But there were some good spots to sit when you get over here where you could have a good view of this end of the clear cut. But you don't just walk up there in the dark in a place like that. We get to a spot like that and we're going to wait. And we might only have 10, 20 steps to where we want to sit there, but we won't go out there until it's first light until we're really sure there's no deer out here. And that takes a little while. And sometimes maybe a half hour, and then it's by that time it might be full light up and you can see where they haven't seen or heard anything. No brush snapping, you know, little small brush snaps and that kind of thing. And then we can move up to the stand site where we want to be. And also, this is the spot right here when you're going through the woods with a flashlight, you know, following your tacks, and you're low on trees, so you're not shining it up here and it goes out into this area. Down low, you hit that spot there where there's 3 tacks are, off goes the flashlight. You don't use a flashlight beyond that point if you're planning to sit here. And there's one spot over here. If you're going to sit there, no flashlight between here and there. So it has to be light enough so you can tiptoe into that natural blind over there where you're going tomorrow. So other than that, then we backed off and went around to get up into this area and scout up there as well. Up here, we have a trail that goes around this end of the clear cut. It used to be whenever we went to hunt in that area, we had to go all the way around it to get around here if there was a west wind. West, northwest, southwest, any of those kind of winds, or even south. We made a long detour. That was a 2-mile detour to get to that stand site. It was always worth it. It was always worth it. But we decided, you know, if we have an east wind, southeast wind, something like that, rather than go around here and have the wind blowing the scent towards the deer in the clear cut, we could go up through here and go through heavy woods all around the edge of that thing until we get to a spot on the other side. So we've got that arranged now so you can, just by any wind direction, you can get into a clear cut or to a stand site in there, that area that are going to be worthwhile. But for years to come, we're probably still making big detours or even around this way to get to stand sites on that side. Great for west winds, northwest, southwest, that kind of thing. So, well, with that, that's half of what we know, and we'll be going back, and we're going to be hunting all kinds of another 2 square miles, and they're tough square miles, big high hills to climb. be a lot of work, and we'll be we'll be pretty tired when we get home from that trip as well. Also, my dog Harvey, you know, you saw him up there. He can't stay home when I go there. Boy, he sticks close to me these days. He doesn't want me to go anywhere unless he can go too. So he's always, when I headed for the door to come to John's house here today, he was bumping against my head. Hey, can I go? Can I go? I said, no, you can't go. He's so afraid I'm going to go scouting without him, and he doesn't want that to happen. Now, there's a lot of bear hunters in the United States, and I've been warning a lot of them. I've been saying something. Now, we're already past the prime time for bear hunting in the United States. You might still go to Canada or Alaska and get bears, but here nowadays down here, you know, there's grouse hunters and pheasant hunters and duck hunters all over the place, and it's making deer in bear country pretty wary, and also bears. You know, bears, that's no problem for them because they tend to be nocturnal anyway, and so they become nocturnal. But I was warning guys, you know, there's about 20 ways you can goof up and not get a big bear. A good friend of mine over in Wisconsin, he's called me several times, and he goofed up. I told him what he shouldn't do, and he went and did it anyway, and he had a big bear coming to his bait, and he never saw it during daylight hours. And once that happens, there's no way to make a bear change his mind. It's just going to come there at night. Eat that bait, oh boy, this is just great in the nighttime. So I told these guys, well, if you didn't get one this year, get the book, get my bear book, my 5th edition of Do-It-Yourself Black Bear Hunting and Baiting, and you'll find about 20 reasons in there why you didn't get a bear this year. And I guess a lot of guys took it there and they started ordering bear books like crazy, which is great, and thank you guys for that. But by now you probably know why you didn't get that bear. Well, same thing with the deer book. In this book you'll find my 6 new mature buck effective stand hunting methods that are good for ground level hunting as well as tree stand hunting. Although I think it's a little easier to do it at ground level than using tree stands, except opening weekend. That took about 20 to 30 years to develop that are big buck effective. You know, most of you don't know what big buck effective means, but in this book it's just like the bear book. If you didn't get that big buck this year that you were hoping to get this book and you'll find out exactly why you didn't get that buck. Same answer. So be sure to do that, but even better, get your book soon now, and so you have time to study it and apply that to your scouting and your hunting this coming year, and your odds of taking a big buck will be so much better. Really will, honestly. And I hate to tell you how good it can be, because I feel like I'm bragging every time I tell you that my 3 sons and I take 105 bucks since 1990. That's almost 1 each per year since 1990. That's fantastic buck hunting. These are mature bucks anywhere, and so rather than wait, you're gonna jump it, improve your odds by learning how to do it this year. But if you don't, get it later, get it at Christmas, write to Santa, tell him you want this 10th edition of my Whitetail Hunter's Almanac, and you'll find the answers in there why you didn't do so well taking a big buck. And really, big bucks are everywhere, even in our area where we only have about 6 deer per square mile because of the wolves and because they're so much more difficult to hunt because of the wolves. You can take big bucks every year, and if you know what to do. But it's not easy. There's a lot to know, a lot of precautions to take. If you have this, it's going to change your buck hunting forever. It really will. And these hunting methods are not something that whitetails are going to get used to and start avoiding like they did tree stands and buck lures over the years. So, get your book. Okay, now before you click, be sure to subscribe, guys. I really wish you would. It's for you in a way. You'll be told when my next YouTube hunting seminars is available. You'll be see one of the first ones to see them, but more important is for me. It's important to my future as a YouTube seminar speaker. And also, click that thumbs up button if you enjoyed what you learned today, and I can't imagine you wouldn't because you learned a few new things today. So, thanks guys for watching. I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.